welcome everybody tonight to our weekly shmooze. Hope everybody's in a good mood. If you're not in a good mood, I hope you get into a good mood. We know that you're not supposed to eat blood of an animal, but blood of a fish is permitted. But interesting, if you had a lot of blood from a fish that's piled up in a plate or a bowl, and you can't tell that it's fish blood, so you're not allowed to eat that because people might think you're eating regular blood from an animal. But if you can tell, there's scales inside of it, you can tell that comes from a fish, so then it's permitted. But if you can't tell, so that you have to make sure to, of course, I think you should smell from fish, no? Fish blood should have a fishy smell probably. But in that case, it's not forbidden because of itself, but because we know we're not supposed to do things that people might suspect us of doing the wrong thing, called maris ayin. Doesn't look good to people. It looks like you're doing the wrong thing. So you have to be careful not to make people have the false impression that you're eating blood of an animal. Now, how about blood from a human being? According to the law, it's permitted, according to the Torah law, but it's rabbinical law not to eat blood of a person. Let's say someone takes a bite into a hard piece of bread, and the gums are a little bit weak, and some blood comes out. So you have to cut off the place where the blood is. You can't eat that blood. But if blood is in your mouth, it comes out from your teeth, you're allowed to swallow that blood because it's not seen to anybody. Nobody can see the difference. It's on a piece of bread. You can tell that it's blood. You can see it's blood. But in your mouth, the blood comes out from your teeth. You're allowed to swallow it. You have to spit it out because nobody can see it. Milk and meat is forbidden to eat together, to cook together, or to derive any pleasure from it. If you, for instance, you use milk and meat to put on the tree to make it grow better, let's say it's supposed to be such a thing, fertilizer, milk and meat together, you can't do that because it's deriving pleasure from the milk and meat. You can cook it together even though you won't eat it. You can't cook it together. You can't eat it together. If two people who know each other are eating together at the same table, one is eating meat, one is eating milk, can't do that. Because since they know each other and they're easygoing with one another, he might just take something while he's eating the meat and schmoozing with the other person and take a little butter and put it on the bread, not realizing that he's eating meat at the time. He's used to putting butter on his bread. So you can't eat together at the same table unless there's some type of heker. You have to make some kind of differentiate between the two people eating. So one person will put a tablecloth underneath, and one person without a tablecloth. So one person put between them a bottle, an empty bottle between them, to remind them not to partake from the other one's food, since one's eating milk and one's eating meat. It's people in the same family. One wants to eat meat tonight, one wants to eat a sandwich, a cheese sandwich, whatever it might be. So you have to make sure that there's a heker, something between, to remind the people that they shouldn't take from each other. Also, they shouldn't eat from one roll or one piece of bread, each one taking, because one person might have his hands be greasy from the meat. One person might be have some of the cheese or the milk on it. You shouldn't eat from the same bread, milk and flesh together, meat and milk dishes together. You should separate loaves of bread, separate rolls, not to eat from the same one. That's why naturally we have separate, people really keep kosher, have two sets of dishes, one for milk and one for meat, in order not to get them together. If you have knives for milk and meat together, different silverware, and they have the same pattern, you have to make some kind of sign on it to show that this is, usually today we have blue for milk and red for meat usually, but there should be some type of way to be able to tell that it's milk and meat, different ones. Of course, this law has depends different minhagim, different customs. Some people who eat meat will not eat milk products for 6 hours afterwards. Some countries, they don't have that minhag. Some people at 4 hours, some people even 2 hours, different minhagim. That most people at 6 hours. What happens after in 6 hours you find a piece of meat between your teeth? You have to wait another 6 hours? So you say, no. Take out the piece of meat from between your teeth, and you take a drink and eat a little piece of bread to clean out the mouth, and you're allowed to eat milk right after that. If the food that you're eating has no meat or schmaltz in it, no fat from any meat, but was cooked in a pot of meat, you're allowed to eat milk afterwards. Since there's no, in the food that you're eating, there's no real meat or fat, you cooked it in such a place so it comes from the pores of the pot that you're cooking in, and gives out from the pores maybe some type of meat, but that far we don't go. You're allowed to eat milk after that. Not together with milk. If it's cooked in a pot of meat, you cannot eat together with a cheese sandwich, but if you finished drinking that was cooked in the pot or whatever it is, and now you might eat milk afterwards, it's permitted. There is certain types of cheeses that if you eat them, you're not allowed to eat meat afterwards. But we don't have those cheeses today. They used to keep them very strong for many months. It was very cheesy and very strong milk residue in a person's mouth. So that type of cheese would be forbidden to eat meat afterwards. But we don't have those cheeses today, I don't think. I never saw it. We shouldn't use a knife that's used for meat products to cut the bread that we're going to eat with the milk. Because when you cut it, it could rub off, or maybe you had something left there on it, so you shouldn't use the same knife. Unless in the place that you have no choice, you clean it off very well, but if for daily use, you should have a separate bread knife to cut the bread and not to cut the bread with a meat knife. Okay, that's some of the laws tonight. So we started last week talking about Rachel wanting children and saying to Yaakov Avinu, give me children. I wrote it again, over again, number 1, Havali Banim. And Yaakov Avinu was angry, upset with Rachel. Why was he upset? We said different possibilities. It doesn't say why he was upset. I thought maybe another reason I was thinking tonight. Maybe he was upset that she was telling him, give me children. In other words, pray for me. You can do it for sure. Right? We brought stories last week from Chana. Eli the Kohen promised her children. It's possible to promise somebody children. A great person can promise children. Promise God to give something to somebody. And she was saying to him, you can do it. He's a great person. Maybe he got upset. You think I'm not praying for you? What are you telling me? I'm praying my best. I'm doing my best for you. Why are you telling me, give me children as if I'm not taking care? Different possibilities why he was upset with her. He said, am I in place of God to give children? It's up to God. You have to pray yourself. It's not only up to me. Some people will go to a great person to pray for them. They forget they have to pray for themselves. If they don't pray for themselves, you can't expect somebody to do something for them if they don't pray for themselves. Chana Remember last week she was praying and praying till Eli came and said, okay, God will give you your wish, he'll give you a child. But she was praying herself the best she could. You can't just leave it up to somebody else and say, you do it for me. But we have in number 4, there was a complaint against Yaakov Avinu for talking to Rachel the way he did. He got angry at her and said to her, am I in the place of God? We'll give you children. God said to him, number 4, Amar Eloi, Hashem, kach ones ha'ma'ikos. Is that the way you speak to people that are in pain, that are suffering? Maybe she did the wrong thing. We don't know exactly why he was angry. There's a few possibilities we said. We'll mention another one later. But she's in pain, she's upset. So you have to be more compassionate. You're too inconsiderate. For the greatness of Yaakov Avinu was such a great person, he was missing a little bit his tenderness, the way he should have spoken to Rachel, who's going through the pain of not having children. He spoke a little too strongly to her. And God said to him, is this how you talk to a person who's in pain, who's suffering? You should be more compassionate, more understanding. And he was punished for that. Many years later, capital punishment for it. But what I wanted to talk about tonight and discuss, the title of tonight's shmooze, anger, can it ever be a good idea? Okay, I didn't write that, but they wrote it, okay. Could ever be a good idea? Is there such a thing as anger to be good? Or is anger no good no matter what? Yaakov got angry. We'll see later on another story. Take us quite a while to get there, but he got angry once again later on. We find Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses got angry sometimes. So what's with anger? Usually look at anger as a terrible thing. Is there anything good about anger? So I want to bring down from the great sages who discussed this point. One of them, the great Mesilas Yesharim, which we've quoted many times, the illustrious, the Italian-born Kabbalist, great scholar, wrote so many books. Rabbi Chaim Mintz, he lived about 400 years ago, less than 400 years ago. He wrote many very important books that are studied. And he discusses in one of his chapters of this wonderful Sefer Mesilas Yesharim the pathways to the righteous. He talks about kas, talks about anger. And he talks about number 5, 4 types of people who get angry. So different levels of people with anger. I think it's important for people to think through them, to think about which one we fit into, and if we do fit into one of them, to try to work on going down to the next level, lower level of anger. If you put it into different levels, it's easy to work on yourself. To find the level that we're in, and then try to work on ourselves to bring us down to the next level. Once we get to the next level, to the next level. We're working towards perfection. So he says, I'm going to translate freely from the text of Mesilas Yesharim. This is in chapter 11. If you have Mesilas Yesharim and want to study it at length, it's a very terrific sefer to learn altogether. It's a type of person, he gets angry at every little thing that people do that he doesn't like. To the extent that he loses his normal das, his way of thinking, of weighing things correctly. He is such an angry person. When somebody gets him angry, he can destroy the world. If he'd be able to push a button and destroy the world, he loses himself. I'm sure we all witness people like that they're totally lost when they get angry, and they become irresponsible. They don't. Their judgment is taken away. They're so angry they can't think straight. He becomes like a wild animal. He can do things. People do things when they're angry. Afterwards, they have such charata and remorse for what they did, but they don't know what they're doing. A person like that can do all kinds of bad things, all kinds of things that are not correct according to Torah law, according to civil law, according to any law. To become like a wild animal. Because what leads him is anger leads him instead of his seichel, instead of his intellect. He's not led by his intellect anymore because he's always getting angry. And when he gets angry, he just loses himself. So he's under the influence, dictatorship of his character trait of kas. That's one, that's the worst. The worst level of anger. That we said over here in number 6. There's nothing that is influencing him. Governed by his anger. Everything he does is governed by his anger. Every little thing upsets him, irritates him. And when he gets irritated, forget it. Now, if a person has to live with such a person like that, it's really almost impossible. Then we have a second level of anger. Number 7, Vagia lahargish yichais kas godel. He's not always getting angry for every little thing, but when he does get angry, watch out. The first person is always getting angry, every little thing, but you can't talk to them without, if you say any little thing against them or do anything that comes in front of them that they don't like, they're always angry all the time, but always full of rage. This person, he has moments of calmness, he's not always getting angry, but when something comes up that's not what he likes, then all of a sudden he can burst into a rage. At that time, he's just about as bad as the first one. The difference between the two of them is the how often they get into this rage. The first one's always getting into a rage. This person, he has his times of calmness, but many times he gets angry and what can I say? Terrible. He loses his seichel again. He doesn't know what he's doing. At that moment, it's very dangerous. He can do things that are very bad for other people. It can be very damaging to other people. Damaging to himself. Some people tear up things, they break things when they get angry, they break good dishes, things, they throw things. So it's something that it's pretty bad, not quite as bad as the first person. Then we have a number 3, the third type, which is number 8 on our sheet. Yiyah ma'at kasa kota. Describes the third person. He doesn't get angry so easily. When he gets angry, it's not such a terrible anger. He doesn't lose his sense of judgment, and he won't do anything that's going to caused a permanent or even a temporary damage, he's angry. He's upset. But he's in control of himself. First two people not in control. But once he gets angry, he keeps angry. He's angry for a while. He keeps angry to himself. He's angry with somebody else. It's something that he hasn't licked it yet. He still feels anger. It stays with him. But he's in control of himself. So that's much, much better than the first one, naturally. The first one are out of control. Then, there's a fourth one who's even better than the third one. Number 9, lo yiver harbe. He doesn't get very angry. But not only that, it just dissipates right away. He gets angry, and right away he feels, what am I getting angry for? And he forgets about it very, very, very quickly. So that's pretty good. I mean, if everybody would be like that, it would be a wonderful world. People get angry, but they're not he's in control of himself, and it disappears after a while. Somebody gets him angry, gets upset, another person, he doesn't keep a grudge. The third one can keep a grudge for a while. He doesn't out of control, but he keeps the anger within himself. This person, he forgets about it. So these are 4 levels of anger. But he ends off this holy book. Omnam, the truth is, midasa shel hazakin oila al kol oila. The type of life and the type of person, Hillel, famous Hillel, Hazakin, who was the head of the Jewish people for many years. I'm sure everybody of Hillel, we have a lot of schools named after Hillel, different organizations called Hillel, named after the great sage Hillel. He was even greater in all these 4 levels. He was above all of them. He was not upset at all for anything that anybody would do to him. It didn't even awaken within him any feeling, any trace of anger whatsoever. This is a person called Naki Minakas. The name of this chapter, by the way, means person who's clean from bad character traits. Clean. Even the 4th one is not clean from it. He got angry. He gets about it right away. It doesn't bother him so much, but he's not clean from it. Still something there. Hillel was not affected whatsoever by anger at all. Now, what's he referring to? I want to say over this story, maybe some of you heard about it, Hillel. It's such a nice story, you can hear it over and over again. It said in the Gemara, I brought the Gemara to say it because I find it interesting. The Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, this is the whole big Gemara, talks about laws of Shabbos. But it brings the story of Hillel. Daf Lamed, the 30th page. Oh, very good. I got the wrong Gemara. Got Bab Metzia instead of Shabbos. Is there a Shas here? Couldn't find it or something. I grabbed the wrong one. I could say the story without looking inside, but I think you would appreciate hearing it inside. See if they, I'm sure they have the Gemara here. To come to the level of Hillel's patience takes a lot of time, a lot of hard work to imagine that no matter what, nothing gets him upset. All the pressure, the nujerai, irritation, just stay calm as if nothing happened. Yes. No. He might have been born with an easier type of disposition than somebody else, but nobody's born perfect. To be perfect, you have to work very hard to be perfect. Some people have a harder time. Some people are born with a nature of kas, of anger. Some people don't. It's an anger. Oh. Thank you very much. A person, the Talmud tells us, should be humble and easygoing like Hillel. What was the story? The two people that they made a bet. And they said that if you can get Hillel angry, you get the money from me. $200, $400 it was. And if you can't get him angry, you got to give me $400. They made a bet. They knew Hillel, what type of person he was, and they wanted to see if they can get him angry. So he said, okay, I'm taking it upon myself. One of them said to him, it's a deal. If I get him angry, give me 400. If I don't, I give you 400. So, it was Erev Shabbos, and Hillel was preparing for Shabbos. He was combing his hair, washing his hair, it says. And this Chevraman came to the door, and he screamed out, Mikan Hillel, Mikan Hillel. Where's Hillel? Oh, where's Hillel? Hillel was the top of the Jewish people at that time. He was like the president, he was the Nasi, he was looked up to his greatness of a Torah scholar. He was one of the greatest people alive at the time. This guy comes in, where's Hillel? Chutzpah, as if calls him by his first name. Where is he? Who is he? He wanted to, get him agitated. So over the hill was in the middle of getting ready for Shabbos, so he put himself around, wrapped himself around with something, and he came out. Amar B'ni, my son, such chavivas, such love. Ma'ata mavakesh, what are you looking for? What can I do for you? You didn't get disturbed by where's Hillel with such a chutzpah. He came out very nicely. Amar lei, she'li yesh li lishol. I have to ask you a question. So, okay. Amar lei, shal b'ni shal, my son, ask me. Sure, no problem. So you think you asked him something smart. Dema, Roishin shel bavlayim segalgalim. Why are the heads of the people from Bavel round? Why do people in Bavel have round heads? Very intellectual question that he asked him. Very highfalutin question, high level. Notice to ask him a silly question. Notice he wants to get him upset. Ask him a silly question. He asks him to come in the middle of his getting for Shabbos, and ask him a silly question. Amar lei, Shaila, Gedoyla, Shalta. Oh, that's a very good question. So I'll give you an answer. Nay, she'ein lohem chayas that are pikchas. Because the midwives in Bavel are not good midwives. So the women give birth, they don't know how to take the baby out. So the kids have round heads. What? Okay. So that was it. He waited for about an hour. And he comes back again. Mikan Hillel, where's Hillel? Where's Hillel? Starts screaming again into his house. So Hillel again patiently got himself wrapped up. He's getting ready for Shabbos still. And he came out. B'ni, my son, Mata Mavakish, what are you looking for? Same friendliness, same niceness. I have a question to ask you. Another smart question to ask. My son, ask him whatever you can ask me another question. Let's see, what's your question? Einayim shal Talmudiyim terutos. Why do the eyes of people from Talmud, since Talmud, why do they have round eyes? How come they have round eyes? First round heads, now that's why they have round eyes. Wanted to get him, he was coming, bothering him for silly questions. Oh, that's a very good question, he said to him. Because there's sand in that below where they lived, a lot of sand, and the wind blows the sand into their eyes, and therefore, that's why. Okay, so that was that. So he goes out again, and he waits for another hour, comes back again, Mikan Hillel, the third time. Where's Hillel? So again, Masata, he prepares himself again, he comes out. Mata Mavakish B'ni, my son, what are you looking for? What can I do for you, my son? Shayla Yesh Yeshel, I have a question to ask you. Another very smart question. Shal B'ni, Shal, sure, my son, ask me the question, go right ahead. Tema, Raglayim Shlarfrikim, V'chavais. How come the feet of people in Africa are wide feet? They don't have thin feet, they have wide feet. Start from the head to the eyes to the feet. So, Benish, that's a very good question you're asking. The answer is because since they go without shoes over there, there's a lot of water, they go without shoes, so therefore the feet expand. They have the shoes to keep them together, but there they go without any shoes, so therefore the feet get flat and stretched out. So he said to him, I have a lot of questions to ask you. You think there's only one? I got a lot of questions to ask you. So he said, okay. You think, what will you say? I had enough of your questions. It's Erev Shabbos, and leave me alone. And he said, oh, of course. He sat down and said, any questions? Ask me all your questions. No problem. All your silly questions. I didn't say, I'm saying that. Ask me all your questions. No problem. What is your question? So he said, you're Hillel, that they call you the Nas of Yisrael. You're the person of Hillel they called it, he's the leader of the head of the Jewish people. Is that really you? He said, yes. He said, if that's you, there should not be many people like you, the Jewish people. People shouldn't be like you. You shouldn't have amongst our nation people like you. He said, why? Because you made me lose $500, $400. You lost the bet. So people like you make people lose money. We don't need it. So this is the famous story of Hillel, who was not makbid, kept calm throughout the whole silly experience this person is putting him through, because he didn't know that there was a bet like that. I don't know what he was thinking Hillel was. This person maybe thought there was something wrong with him, whatever. But he just didn't lose his calm, and he stayed just like he was before. Didn't have any effect upon him. So this is what the Solomon Sharm is telling us over here, that even though we went through the 4 levels of anger, and the first one is terrible, and the last one is very good, but still not the same as Hillel, who did not have any trace of anger in his body. You can do whatever you want to him. He stayed calm and didn't get angry at all. There's no feeling of anger within him at all. Not for any time at all. And there was a totally calmness, and he was just as happy and satisfied. Nothing bothered him. That is called Naki. They call Naki a person who was Naki, who was clean from the midah of the character trait of Kas. that's something, a lifelong midah for a person to acquire this character trait, to be totally not perturbed and not upset with anything. That's naturally not an easy thing for people to reach, and most people will not reach it, but it's possible. If Hillel could do it, other people can do it also. It's not the only one. If he was able to do it, we can't say, well, it's impossible. If somebody we know somebody who did it, it's possible. But there's one thing that Sil Sharm says, I want to bring out an interesting thing. Once he discusses this, so he said the midah of Hillel went above all of those that we said before, even the fourth one. It wasn't upset with anything. There was no even awakening, no trace of kas within him. That's called naki. It's called clean from kas. So then he says like this. But sometimes a person has to get angry. Sometimes a parent with a child will never get angry. The child's running, well, you always say, he's running across the street and say, oh, don't go across the street. It's not nice, it's not good to cross. No. The child will do things that are terrible and hit somebody else and say, oh, don't hit somebody else. You have to be angry. He has to see that bothers you. If you just smile to him all the time and don't get angry, what kind of chinuch? You're not training him. You have to show anger. You have to show that you're upset with what he's doing. So what do you do about that? Of course, he says, you have to scold them. Maybe you have to patch them once in a while. But, kas shayarlam yeh kas haponim. The anger should be on your face, but not in your heart. You have to put it on the neck. You put it on the neck. No, you're supposed to be like Hillel. You don't get angry. You see a child doing this, the child doing that. I mean, this is almost impossible, but it's possible. If a person reached the highest level of nikiyas, of being clean from anger, inside you're as calm as Hillel. But the child, you scream at him, you can scold him, maybe patch him, but with inside, you're calm. Of course, that's important anyway, because if you're angry at the first person, we're talking about how many children suffer from their parents who get angry, and the first level, the second level, that's the only what they're doing. Some children suffer from their parents' abuse. The parents are not training the child. They're just taking out their anger on the child. They're using the child for their punching bag. That's terrible, naturally. But here we're talking about that a person who reaches the highest level that we're talking about, he has to show anger, act with anger, talk with anger, but not be angry. That is Mitzvah Shor. Interesting. He's not the only one who says this. There are great rabbis who wrote great books before him, a few hundred years before, said the same thing. He's not by himself. This is what his opinion on the matter. But the Rambam disagrees. We have the number 12. If we take the Rambam, we quoted many times, I have to give any descriptions who the Rambam was, the great Rambam, in the laws of character traits. All of you will have a chance to study Rambam, all the great works of the Rambam, unbelievable, beautiful things that he tells us. In the first chapter of the laws of character traits, the Hilchos Deis, something has to be discussed at length, but we're just taking out the excerpts and to bring out this point. Hadrach HaYeshara. Of course, he discussed it from before, but I'm just bringing this. The correct way for a person to live and to act. Mida beinunis. It has to be in the middle of the road type of actions. In every type of character trait in the person. Not to be extremes. Not to go to one extreme, not to go to a different extreme. The middle of the road. Lefikach, therefore, person should always think before he acts, is this action that I'm doing, is it to an extreme? Or it's in the middle of the road and the way I should be acting. Kegain, for instance, Keitzad, lo yiyeh bal chema noach lechois. You should not be a person full of anger who's easy to get angry, because it's an extreme. Like we said in the Silsher Shor, extremes. Easy to get angry, and when it gets angry, to be very angry, no good. Person has to keep away from extremes. But it cannot be like a dead person who doesn't feel anything. Ella Benani, in the middle. What does it mean? That's what we have in the last words of on the sheet. He should not get angry unless it's something that's proper, that's, how to translate over here? Situation is very bad. You should not get angry unless the circumstances call for it. What is that? Kadesh lo yase kiyotze boy pam acheres. If you have training a child, for instance, and you don't want him to do what he did again, he did something wrong. So you have to get angry at him, and he see that you're angry, and feel that something wrong with what he's doing. You can't be like a mace, he says, like a dead person who doesn't feel anything. So once you get angry, with something has to be done. Something has to be accomplished with the anger. Something that you want to train, a child, or whoever it might be, or a student, or maybe an adult. Somebody's doing something wrong, you have to make sure that they get the message. So here the Rambam is saying, not like the Shar, right? He says you're not supposed to be like a maid. According to the Shar, you're supposed to be like a dead person. You're not supposed to feel any anger whatsoever. The Rambam is just interesting, the different approach. That he says the person could feel anger, but he calls it Benani. How often should you get angry? You should get angry. Only when the circumstances are ripe for getting upset. Because, number one, a person who puts on an act of anger who's not really angry usually doesn't do too good of a job. If you're not angry, put on an act. You have to be a good actor. Not everybody's a good actor. If you feel angry, feel upset, so you can give over, communicate to the other person the feeling you want to give and what you want to teach them. If you don't really feel it, you're not angry, not upset about it, you just want to try to impress the person with an act, it just doesn't work too good. Everything God created in the world has a purpose. He created anger. Every character trait that we have has a purpose. Most of them are not supposed to be used very often. Most of the time we have to be not angry. 95%, 99% of the time not supposed to be angry, or any other character trait. Most of the time we're supposed to be benevolent, to be kind. To be stingy, we consider that a bad character, a bad midah, bad character trait. But sometimes you have to be stingy. Sometimes somebody asks you for something to help them, and you know it's be detrimental to them. The child wants to play with the knife, so you have to be mean, and they'll cry because you're not giving the knife to play with. But you have to be mean at that time. Avzorius, cruel. Be cruel. You're not supposed to be cruel. No, sometimes you have to be cruel. The doctor has to cut off the gangrene arm or the leg of a person. So you have to be cruel. Usually, cruelty is a bad midah, but it comes in very importantly sometimes. There's no such thing as a bad midah. We call it a bad midah because usually it's not good. Usually it's not good to be cruel. Usually it's not good to be stingy. But every midah has its place. If God created anger, it also has its place. In a situation where you want to give over to somebody, that you should feel it and make impression upon them, so then anger is a good thing, because you give it over when you really feel it. It's called Dharm Hayis Min Alev Nasim D'Alev. If you give over from your heart to somebody, it goes into his heart. But God created anger, put into a person that midah. They must have some kind of place. It's not just for nothing. It's not something created to keep away from. Usually keep away from it, but sometimes it has to be used. Imagine a child learning the Sil Sesharim, like many people learn when they're young, and it says, don't get angry, child, just put it in an act that you're angry. So the child says, hey, whenever his parents get angry, that's an act. They're not worried about it. They're acting. They don't really mean it. They're screaming at me, they're not really screaming. They look angry, not really angry. It's not going to make very much of an impression. If they know they're really angry, so then it makes an impression. The Gemara refers to it as Rischa D'Oraisa, it's called. The anger of Torah. Somebody is doing a act which is not proper. The Torah law forbids it. Some people get upset. You say, don't get upset, be calm. I'm not going to get calm. Don't get God's law. God said, don't do it. So be calm, it's okay. It's not, like I said, it's not so bad. It's very bad. A person shouldn't get upset, get angry. How can you do a thing like that? It's called Rischa D'Oraisa. It's called anger of Torah anger. Upset not because a person's own ego is involved. Most people get angry because of their own ego. Because they feel you're doing something against me. How could you do that? That certainly is an anger which is not proper if we want to really go into perfection. Not because their own ego was disturbed. But for God's sake, how could you do a thing like that? Against God's law? If a person wouldn't get angry, just be calm, would that be proper? Somebody goes and embarrasses your parents. Says, I'm not angry, it's okay. I won't get angry. I'll just put on an act, scream at him, what are you doing that for? But I won't get angry. You should get angry. A person goes against your parents, does something, so that's your parents. You can't stand by and just be calm. Someone does something against God, just to stand by and not do anything, not feel anything, I should say, that wouldn't be proper either. Maybe the Sherman agrees to that. Maybe he's saying only anger. He's talking about training children and so on, but something's going against the Torah, going against God. Maybe also, he doesn't say it over here openly, but I imagine maybe he agrees to that. And there are certain times he also agrees that he could get angry. I once heard a story about the great Rabbi Aaron Kotler, one of the great rabbis of the last generation, who was at a dinner, fundraising dinner, from the famous tzedakah, Chinuch Atzmoi, he was in charge of. That was for education in the land of Israel, for the schools over there that teach kids Torah. And made an appeal at this dinner, and somebody got up to make an appeal asking people to donate the money. And the response was not up to the level he wanted it to be. And he got very upset. And he got up unexpectedly. He was not supposed to make the appeal. Afterwards, he gave it to them. He screamed at them, what's going on over here? You don't realize how important it is. And he gave it. And the money came in afterwards. He was upset. And he showed his upset. The people got the message. If he would have gotten up and just put on an act and he's very calm, he never would have had the results that he wanted to have. Sometimes the midah of kas is a very important midah a person has to show. So this is something that Vayichar af Yaakov. Yaakov got angry. He was punished for what he said. Doesn't sound he was punished for getting angry. Maybe he was justified to be angry over it. We don't know exactly why he was angry. He says different possibilities why he got angry. But we don't find he was punished for getting angry. Maybe with the circumstances justified his anger. He got punished for talking to Rachel in such a way. He spoke with anger to her, and she was in pain. She was suffering. So you say, you shouldn't have talked to her like that. But the fact he got upset at what she said to him, something upset him, and we said a few possibilities why, but it was something that the anger itself seems to be, was justified, but the way he spoke afterwards was not justified. And that's a very big sign for a person. If you get angry, you have to be careful what you say. So if you go with the social shop, you don't get angry, so it's easy to control what you're saying, because you're not really angry. So that's a good thing about Mr. Sharm's type of showing anger. Not angry, but you have to show it, you have to act angry. So it's easy to be careful what you're saying if you're putting on an act. But if you go to Rambam, you're feeling anger, so then you have a problem that you might say something that's not correct. Maybe in anger, you have to be total control. Even Rambam was talking about that a person should not be amazed, not be dead. You should have a feeling, margish, but it has to be totally in control of himself. You have to know exactly what you're saying and say it the right way and say the words you're supposed to say and act the way you're supposed to act. But a person gets angry and loses control, then there's nobody who's going to say that's the right thing to do. Because a person losing control, then you don't know what you can say, you don't know who you can hurt, you don't know what kind of damage a person can do by that. So this is something that kas, that we have to think about, that's very important. And we mentioned last week that the way Rashi says, the conversation between Yaakov and Rachel was the following. We mentioned last week that she said to him, look at your father Yitzchak and Rivka, your mother. They couldn't have children for so many years. And Yitzchak prayed for Rivka, and they had a child. So you have to do the same thing for me. So he said to her, how can you compare the two things? Yitzchak didn't have any children. I have children. He had Leah. He had children. He had 4 children already. So therefore, the burden of prayer is falling on you because you're the one who needs it more than me. Of course I'm praying for you. But your prayers are more important than mine since you're the one who needs it. I don't need it because I have children already. Not going to listen to me as much as to listen to you because you're missing children altogether. So she said to him, she didn't leave him alone. Yeah, but look, Avram Avinu, your grandfather, Avram had a child from Hagar, and still he prayed for Sarah. So we're in the same position, same situation. You have children, Avram had children. I don't have children, she didn't have children. He prayed so strong for her, and they had children. So he said, you know why? Because she brought Sarah Bilhah, she brought Hagar into the marriage. Sarah said, if I can't have your children, so I want you to have to build up the Jewish nation, so I'll overlook my tsar of bringing another wife into the marriage, but we have to do it. You have to build up the Jewish nation. And that schar and that reward that she was willing to overlook her own honor and her own self-respect and bring another wife into the marriage in order to have children, in that schus, in that merit, God gave her a child. So Rachel said, if that's the case, so that I'm going to bring another wife into the marriage. Bilhah, her maidservant, who was a big tzaddikus, a very righteous person, and therefore I'll have the same schus that Sarah had to bring in Hagar. I want to build a Jewish nation also. I want my maidservant, for you to have, we have to have their old Nevi'as, their old word prophetess, the Mois. We have to have 12 children have to be built up to 12 branches of the Jewish nation. So I'll bring in Bilhah. And then the Torah says, so she became pregnant and had a child. And Rachel said, Donani Elokim, God judged me, and they listened to my voice, to my prayers. Like her own son, since her maidservant that she had, considered like her own child. She called his name Don. Don means judgment. And she showed, God judged me first and judged me not favorably, and now judged me favorably to give me at least children, not my own child, but for my maidservant I have a child, which is considered like my child to a certain extent. I'll raise the child. So God judged me. So she was saying, I accept God's judgment. She didn't have any complaints to God. He judged me first against me, so to speak, without any children, and now he judged me to have a child. And therefore, she was very thankful, even though she suffered till then. But now she accepted God's judgment. Whatever he did till then was okay. And now for sure, it's okay. He gave me a child. She had the son Don. That means the judge. That means she had in front of her whole life this idea that God judged me not favorably in the beginning and now favorably afterwards. And I accept it. I accept God's judgment. She went through her life seeing this child, that whatever God does, I accept. God judges sometimes in a way we like, sometimes just in a way we don't like, but we have to like it even though we don't like it. In other words, if God's judged that way, obviously that's what's supposed to be, and I don't have any complaints against him. And, as we mentioned, by the other 4 sons, I guess we'll stop with this, the other 4 sons, when Leah had the first 4 sons, she didn't only give them a name for what they were then, but with her prophecy, she saw what they'll be in the future, the greatness of every child that she had. She saw into the future, hundreds of thousands of years in the future, what their greatness is going to be. And the greatness that Rachel saw in Don, who do you think came out of Don? Shimshon HaGibor, Samson, the mighty. Samson, Shimshon, the one who was the great judge of the Jewish people, the one who was the strong person who was able to do miraculous actions with the strength. And the last action of his life was, if you remember the history, if you learn the book of Judges, Shoftim, holy book of Shoftim, Shimshon was one of the great judges of the Jewish people, and he fought the battles of the Jews against the Philistines. In his time, the Plishtim were the enemies of the Jewish people. Plishtim, the Philistines, we call them in English, Plishtim, and they're the ones who were giving tsaras and problems to the Jewish people, that they were constantly attacking them and giving them all kinds of problems. And Shimshon was the one who was standing up and fought against them for the Jewish people. But they caught him afterwards, the whole story of Delilah, Samson, the Delilah, Delilah, really in Hebrew, Delilah, that she was his wife, and she went against him, and she double-crossed him, and she gave him up to the Plishtim. They took out and blinded him, took out his eyes, the Philistines, when they caught him, and they put him into the dungeon over there. So the last feat of his life was, if you remember, he got this boy who was serving him, that the Plishtim were on top having a big party, And they were dancing and singing, and he was down there blind with the eyes out, and he told him to put his hands around the two pillars of the building that was standing on, and the last action that he pulled down the pillars, and all the Plishtim fell down and they died. Thomas Nafshin Plishtim, the famous words, let my life die with the Plishtim. He died with them, but he helped the Jewish people. They were painting the Jewish people so much in those times. So Don, the son of Don, came out Shimshon Agibor, this Samson, and she said that God will judge the Philistines for the terrible actions against the Jews through my son Don, his great-great-great-great-grandson. That was hundreds of years, 1,000 years later. But she saw a prophecy, that's what her great-great-grandchild of Shimshon is going to be. So Don was not only done for herself, God judged me, but he also is going to judge the Philistines in the future for what they did to the Jewish people, the agony and pain and sorrow they inflicted upon the Jewish people, that this son will be the one to save the Jews from that pain. So this was the greatness of Don, partial greatness of what he did. So that's for tonight. We're going to stop here and open up the gates to any comments or questions.
Rabbi, in your theme regarding anger, you mentioned the four types of angry people, and the first person who's very, very angry and constantly angry. So, and I understand that the Torah says you shouldn't be angry, but I think the question really is, how do you control that anger? Because usually it's not something that you just switch on or off. It's an emotion you have. And in today's day and age, the answer to everything is drugs. Let's get somebody some kind of Valium or
that kind of drugs.
Who knows what. But what is the Torah? What's the old-fashioned real solution for that?
Well, this is something we discussed in previous shmuzim that we had. And this is something which is a very deep and difficult thing for a person to work on. But the famous Vilna Gaon, the great sage of a few hundred years ago, says a line in one of his great writings in Hebrew, Iker Brias Ha'adam, Shviras Hamidos. The main purpose for a person's creation is for him to overcome his bad character traits. The reason why God created man was to overcome his bad character traits, his kas, his anger, his arrogance, his laziness, his stinginess. Every man's born with all these midas. Some people have them worse, some people have them born with less, like the Rambam talks about. We can quote him tonight, but the Rambam discusses that. Everybody has bad character traits. That's what we're here for. A person shouldn't feel bad. I have a bad character trait. Don't feel bad about it. But a person has to work on changing them. So it's really a long, maybe we should dedicate a year now. We haven't so much for a long time, maybe to talk about it. Maybe next week we'll dedicate some to talk about this. What you say. I hate to just go real fast because it's not doing justice to answering your question. But this is something which is very, very, very important for us to understand how to work on this. It's easy to talk about it, but how to change a person, how to work. I think next week we'll
Thank you.
dedicate that.
I have a question about kashrus.
Yes.
What is the reason we are allowed to eat the blood of a fish? Is it a different blood? What is it?
Reason why what?
Why we are allowed to eat the blood of a fish?
Oh, blood of a fish. Oh, the blood of a fish.
Just want to know the technical thing.
A fish is totally different from an animal. You don't have to shecht a fish either. You don't take a knife and shecht a fish. A fish, you just kill it and eat it. An animal has to be slaughtered a certain way, although it's not kosher. So fish is a whole different. Probably, it is considered more of a higher level animal of fish, because we just learned last week we read the Parsha of Noach that God brought the flood and all the animals were destroyed. Guess who was not destroyed? The fish. The fish did not stick with their different species. All the animals in the world, man and animals, were having relations with other species than their own, which is not what God wants. It's to stick to their own species. The fish kept to their own species, therefore, they were in a higher level of purity than all the other animals. So that's giving us a clue that they don't have to be slaughtered in a certain way, and their blood is permitted because they're in a higher level of spirituality than the other animals. They're in a different category altogether. You have to shech them. There's nothing forbidden to eat the fish. Other animals are not allowed. There's chaylev, and also there's certain type of fats you're not allowed to eat in other animals. A fish doesn't have such. Every part of the fish you're allowed to eat. There's nothing you might not want to eat it, but there's nothing forbidden in the fish to eat. So it's totally different from other animals. Other animals now there's the blood and the chaylev and gidanashe. There's so many different things in the animal you're not allowed to eat, but a fish doesn't have any of those laws. It's a higher level of purity, a fish, than other animals. That's why it's mitzvah and Shabbos to eat fish. Because Shabbos is a day of holiness, and the fish is only has a spirit higher level of holiness than the other. Good question.
Rabbi, about the kosher law again. Dishwasher. What's the law about dishwasher? Can I wash
we don't
dishes
discuss
and put
halacha.
them?
We don't discuss halacha in this class. We don't discuss halacha. Halacha is, we ask about hashkafa, about Jewish philosophy and ideas and thoughts. If you want halacha, you can ask me afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think this is halacha question. I want to know the reason. Is it why we have to wait 6 hours or 4 hours? Is it that the food stays in the mouth, how long it takes to digest, or the amount of time between meals, or where do we come up with?
Yeah, well, there's two different opinions on that. You mentioned both of them very quickly. One is because sometimes in your mouth there stays particles of meat and fat in your mouth more, and one because it digested so fast. So therefore, because not a lot of meat and milk can meet together. That's the reason for it. So it's still considered together. If you don't wait a certain amount of time in your mouth, there's going to be a mixture of milk and meat. That's why you have to wait.
What's the difference if you have dairy first and then meat? You don't really have to wait, or you only have to wait a short time and rinse out your mouth in terms of digestion.
Yeah, because dairy doesn't have the same kind of fats that meat has.
I'm saying if you have dairy, then you have meat, so then they all mix in your stomach. So why would be
Because
the difference?
No, dairy is considered much more faster digestible than meat. Meat is much harder to digest than
I'm saying,
dairy.
but if you have dairy, you don't have to wait 6 hours to have meat.
Right, because dairy,
you have to
there's no fats in your mouth or in the stomach that takes longer to digest or stays in your mouth. Dairy is much more easy to, you don't have this, it's not the same thing. You touch meat, your hands are greasy. Dairy parts is not greasy. And it's not, it's much easier digestible. We know if you eat meat, much harder to digest it before you go to sleep. People don't want to eat meat a lot of times. They have bad dreams. It doesn't. Light meal is that's why you eat light meals in the daytime, but people usually at the nighttime when they're not going to work, whatever it is, after the day's over, they eat it. But that's a known thing that meat is much harder to digest than the dairy products. Because when the meat's in your system, it's there. It doesn't go away so fast. When you eat the dairy, it comes together. But if you eat the dairy first, that digests much faster. Any other questions or comments? Of kas. Anybody's reached the level hillel that they don't have any kas at all? Please stand up and take a bow. Anybody who came to that level of greatness? I'm sure there's some people that did, but they're as humble as Hillel. They don't want to get them to say it, so therefore we can't really find out. Okay. What? Oh yeah. Right. Good gesagt. Okay, so Nice seeing you all, and hope to see you again next week. Same time, same station.